Hi everyone, thank you for joining. Yeah, I'll dive into it because we're perfectly in time. As Pia Carlson talked to us today about the scaling up of a startup, I was taking the other part, which is also about something, how you handle your startup when you try to set up and which mistakes you might want to avoid. So some ideas and hints on what you can do to avoid some pitfalls and sharing some experience here. So this is intended on helping, especially of course, blockchain startups which we are surrounded by, because we are helping the community if we can. And so I'm trying to share some insights here. Yeah, so blockchain startups in the view here. What can you do and what do you have to keep in mind to organize your blockchain startup successfully? Looking at the starting point, what are things to have in mind? Okay, with some lag here. I'm going to look at three major topics from experience I can share as I'm doing operations, legal, HR, and finance topics. This is where I have my experience field, so I'm going to share on these things. First, how you set up the founding team. What do you have to think about and in such a situation, and what to avoid, what to keep in mind to also make it successful for the long run, because over time you run into issues, and I've heard so many founders talk about issues that they run into. It's kind of repetitive in many cases. Let's try to avoid it from the start. Second, I'm going to talk about the legal setup. So we're talking about blockchain here. There's regulation. And the second part, there's also taxation. There's the question, where do you get your funding, etc. Many questions. What do you have to keep in mind? Also the structure of your legal setup. And then we have number 3, which is location. Location with a special viewpoint, mainly also on regulation, on taxation, also on market, payments and tax a little bit. I mean, we have some experts around. If you need more on tax, for example, I can recommend some people. Sorry, this is moving backwards. Okay, now as a note, before we dive into it, of course, before you put all your energy into a project, take a moment, do your market analysis, check the product market fit a little bit, maybe with very simple methods like design thinking, so you don't run full energy, maybe a lot of your own capital and energy and time into one direction to find out 1 or 2 years later that it might have been just one turn to the left. This is just a warning, so try to keep that in mind. Reflect on your ideas and try to pivot if you find early on that the market will not support this idea, but something very typical. Because in many cases you can see that many startups in the blockchain world, so me having worked in e-commerce, in big data industries and many other industries, you often see they start like this, then they move to the right, then they move to the left, and then at some point they start taking off. That's the successful ones. And those who don't, or some took the wrong turn or run out of energy, done. So try to anticipate where you can. You will not have the perfect plan, so don't waste too much energy in that. As we do also in our organization, you need to stay agile. You're a startup, you're not a big corporate who can waste 2 years in analysis. But in any case, keep it in mind, never waste to think first. So, setting up the founding team. Just some takes on that. What is a founding team? Founding team meaning really the driving people, the later maybe C-levels for a company, how many, and how does it work? So one thing is, like you will see with Eternity Establishment, the founding team was several people. There was one founder as the major driver, that's for sure, but you always need to put together good minds with good ideas, but also integrating with each other. So, for example, one guy is an excellent developer, you know, or maybe a CTO, but the other person covers legal operations or finance or stuff like that. You need to combine forces. It's extremely difficult to be successful if you are alone, because you can't have your head everywhere. You don't want to blow up the number of people, but you also need at least one partner in crime if you want to be successful. just doesn't work otherwise. It's extremely rare that one person succeeds alone. And if you look at history, you will also see that many very successful people at least had somebody backing them who they shared knowledge and power with. All right, fit of the founders, this is what I was talking about, skill sets, etc. Then write down and discuss the goals a little bit, because, I mean, communication is a beast, and you often see that we are sitting together in a room, we say, yeah, we agree on this. Okay, and then you write it down in a protocol, very boring, but very efficient, and it's like, no, that's not what I meant, you know? But this is exactly what you said. No. So you have to find a way to focus on a common ground, and you need to use several methods to do that. And it's not like just sitting in a room, you're very inspired, especially at the start of a startup, and then you think like, we all agree, we all have the same aims, the same goals, and we think it's the same path. Often you don't. So you need to go through the struggle, always keep it efficient, but you need to go through the struggle and discuss this and try to point it somewhere and put it on the wall maybe. Don't make it a huge document, it's just a waste of time, but make it lean and go there and find out if you're really communicating the same way here. So another thing, are you all motivated or just a sidekick? So I myself have founded several startups, and in one case, for example, I remember very well that I was working normal hours for my work, then I was working additionally in the evenings and the nights and on the weekends, and then we come together. One guy has his business and is kind of working on that and focuses on that and is keeping this as a sidekick. The other guy has his studies, and then you come together on Monday, everybody presents results, and I have results and they don't, you know, and one is then simulating the results. So are they serious about it? And the other thing is, do they have the financial and personal ability to push through? So do they have the energy, and do they have the option to focus enough time? Because if you need to finance whatever, a family, if you have a house that you're paying off or whatever, and then you need to run into conflict with your day job that gets you the money in, you might not be in the situation to start up really, or you need to be realistic. So maybe somebody is co-founding still, but the role needs to be clearly defined. Otherwise, some people focus all the time, 100%, 150% if they can, and the other people are doing that with 20, 30%, and they want the same share. Coming to the same topic, also clearly define and discuss roles and rights. So who is going to be the CEO? Who is going to be the CTO? Who's going to be what? I mean, talk about it however you like to call it, but the main point being, who does what, and who can decide what? Who can decide what alone? What do you decide together? And that also means not only power, but also responsibility. So you mess up, you take the blame. What is something you do together as a team and make your team errors together? And what do you do alone and then take the responsibility for that field? You need to work together. Very important, there's a lot of good feeling at the founding of something. People don't discuss the detail, and then they run into issues in the long run. And that either sabotages their success, or it gets them into trouble at least and costs them a lot of energy, sometimes also time and money. One more thing, also pointing out the team topic. If you see what big investors do, very, very successful big investors often ask for the team first. And sometimes you even see that they say, I'm not going to invest into your business, but you as a team, I can pivot with you to something totally different. So team is extremely important. Coming to the next one, discuss the distribution of success. So of course, at the start of a startup, when you say like, let's do this, everybody's inspired and everybody's happy and joyful, but what happens? I mean, if you're not successful, it's not a debate, but what happens if you're successful? And then it's like, oh, you really want more, 1% more, but I thought we didn't and we disagreed on this one? Okay, let's have a big fight, and then often a founder leaves or something is really, it's a long distance run there. So talk about this early. Don't get too greedy because you feel like the world is below you, and at that moment you think like you can distribute the billions. But the main point being, be clear how you share, and clarify that early, especially regarding the founding team. I will look into people coming on later as well, but that's the next slide. And then one last thing in that regard, You're the founding team, you obviously know something about what you plan to do. Some people have the in-depth expertise on the field, and some people have more management expertise or whatever talent. But you will never know it all. And you can, of course, make your own mistakes. It takes some years more, or it might ruin you, or might run you into the ground. Or you can find some people who have the experience, at least in management, sometimes in the field, in the industry, or sometimes just in how do I manage a company, how do I set up, or whatever. Saves you to have to learn everything by yourself, saves you a lot of time and a lot of money, and might get you to success instead of wasting 2 years or what of your life. So you need to find the right people there. Keep in mind that they have to have the right motivation too. So it's often more experienced people who have earned their money, and you don't want them to be kind of too interested in jumping in as a co-founder themselves, because then they have a conflict of interest. But they need to be advisors. Look for them if you can. If you find somebody who is mentoring you, great success. Looking at the next one, number 2, this is a legal setup. I'm talking about mostly entity, roles, and rights here. So being a lawyer myself, I know this stuff a little bit, but I'm looking at it mostly from the founders and management perspective. So legal framework, what legal framework do you pick? A DAO is not yet a legal framework to my knowledge, maybe it is somewhere, but basically, will you build this as a foundation, as a for-profit entity like a limited or whatever? Think about that early, because yes, you might have to pivot over time, but that costs you dearly. Time, discussions, especially if you have shareholders in or token holders and so on, and a lot of money because the legal fees and so on, and your focus goes away for a time. So if you pick the right institution, legal institution from the start, you save a lot of effort and stress. So, and it's like 80-20. With all of these things I'm saying, it's 80-20. Talk to some lawyers, for example, talk to some other people, and then pick the right thing. Don't go at it forever. It's not a study. This is real life. But think about that early. Save a lot of trouble, and at least gets you midterm, to a midterm. Long term is the ideal. As I said, you try to save the money and the stress, because it's always a distraction. All this formal stuff is a distraction of what you mainly want to do. Now, look for a simple administration and low cost and legal and tax maintenance. What am I talking about? Simple thing, like you have a very complex construction, like a stock listed company or stock company, and then you have something below it and something below it. All that will cost you paying tax advisors to operate all these things. Will cost you, at least in the setting up, legal fees for getting everything set perfectly, because it's almost impossible to do it yourself, at least being secure and having everything set perfectly. You need these guys, and don't underpay them, but also if you are just, if your lawyer becomes your best friend, it's maybe gone a little bit too far. You know, and you don't want that, you don't want to pick something that you need to finance a lot of administration all the time. It's just too complex. Try to keep it simple if you can, and keep in mind that somebody needs to put your yearly figures together, somebody needs to interact with the tax offices, and so on. Try to keep it lean. Then also keep in mind investors, if it's an investment thing, I mean, it can also be on a token basis. In any case, keep in mind that you are the founding team, yes, but people, probably you will want to have capital come in later in whatever construction, and keep in mind their interests, their rights, but also the balancing out. So you see that in many startups that they traditionally, if they have a legal body, they found it for themselves, and then they start needing more investors, or investors want to get in. That may be tokenization topics, but also just a normal frame. And then they realize that the whole construction was not meant to be like that. And you at least want to get the first wave in without having to change the whole setup. Also a pain otherwise. I mean, you're not do it for 10 years, it doesn't work, you can't set it up perfectly if you're not maybe extremely experienced, and you never know where you're going, but try to think ahead in that regard. It will come, most probably. Also keep in mind what happens if people exit. So whatever, Founder now has a family, 3 children. There's enough money, he can exit or she can exit. They want to leave. You always have to put that in the contract or in the setup, like the legal framework from the start. You have to have a flexibility, like being able to buy back shares or whatever, or tokens, like, you know, and you want to have that set, because if you start that discussion, it ends like this. I've seen that many times. Oh, it's so much more valuable. Yeah, but you're leaving us. It's kind of treason. We want to punish you. We will buy it back for the number value, and the person says, but the real value is so much higher, and you end up in a very nasty discussion that destroys friendships as well. You have to have something that's clear from the start, and then you end up with not a big discussion at the end that's destructive and also can reflect back badly to the team. Yeah, then balancing decision and control between shareholders, token holders, whatever. That means that you need to ensure that there's always a functional balance between founding team, people coming later, and all these people who might have been given their heart, their interest, like co-workers, but also token holders, whatever. You need to balance it out. It's of course also part of the general token models you might be running for and so on. But just mentioning, think about these people as well. How do you balance it out? Who is in control of which decisions? How do you get it to work? And also that means, like, you don't want to, especially in more traditional entities like a limited or so, you don't want anybody to be able to make a blockade. If you have, say, 4 founding partners and they all have the same rights, it can end up very nasty. So that's one of the reasons why a 3-person team is very good. I've seen that happen, and then the company is stuck, and sometimes they battle it out so hard that they run the company or the project into the ground instead of giving up and just going one way. And in business and in projects, it's always more important to get moving than to have the perfect decision. I think most of us or all of us know that. So never get into a 50-50 situation if you can avoid it. Also meaning that you have to think about who is allowed to get a 25.1 stake in a project, if it's structured the traditional way or however your token setup works in a more modern way. Yeah, keep that in mind. And then, of course, pick the right jurisdiction, but we'll look at this in the last slide I have, actually, trying to reduce slides here. I hope I get an interest rate on that. Yeah, location. So what is location about? Just looking at some topics, of course. Location is most critical for a blockchain company, especially if you're in the cryptocurrency part, due to regulation. It's very important that you pick the right jurisdiction here. Some are very progressive, some are very unprogressive, might run you into many difficulties, including tax, of course. And also keep in mind that rules change. So we know about some things, for example, coming up on the European level. We need to observe it, because if that changes and kills your project, it can make it a lot more easy, or it can make it a lot more difficult, depending on what's coming. I mean, observe the US, observe the EU, observe whatever happens in your country. It's important to understand that. That's a very important topic to pick the right place for your blockchain company. And of course you need to know, do I want to interact in the European Union, in the US, in Asia, whatever? What is my first target market? Yeah, changing it later will be very painful. You would need to change the jurisdiction, you would need to move out tax-wise, and you would need to find the right legal setup again and everything. Really don't. Really try to avoid it. It's pain. Luckily, we didn't have to do it. So then, if you look at that, look at your specific need. It's not like we are blockchain friendly. I mean, are you an exchange? Different regulation. Are you a first layer project like we are? Okay, different regulation. Utility coin or token, whatever, or I mean, it's a security, and it might be a different thing in different legislations. You need to talk to some lawyers and other advisors for that. Try to not pick just one, pick a little bit more of all the opportunities you see, because first advice is usually for free. and also you need to really broaden your perspective. It's not just you're living, like look at Eternity establishment. The Prince of Liechtenstein invited the founder, Yanni, to found it in Liechtenstein, because in Germany they told him basically, as far as I know, well, you can do it. When he asked like tax and legal authorities, you can do it. 50% you'll end up in jail, 50% it's fine. And then the Liechtenstein people told him like, we will get you a secure legislation. We're going to test this. We're going to be fast with it as well. And that's like how one of the largest project in Liechtenstein ever came to Liechtenstein, as far as I know, the largest one. Keep that in mind. Then, as I said, kind of integrates there. Try to get a short feedback from the authorities, ideally in wherever you look for, but also especially there where you think you have found the right location. Try to kind of interact with them. That's a lot easier in a place like Liechtenstein than in a place like the US probably. I don't know, but keep that in mind if you can, like water test it, because the lawyers will always tell you, this is what I assume the regulator will do. No promise, you know, but we assume. And it's better to ask the regulator what they will decide. They will not give you a stamp and a guarantee, because that takes whatever, but try it, you know, try at least talking to them. It's not always possible, but you can try. Saves you a lot of trouble, because otherwise half a year and several thousands, hundreds of thousands costs later, you find out, oh, they changed their mind. Anyway, yeah, then sourcing. Don't forget sourcing, guys. You know, where do you get your talent? You can, of course, found in Alaska and source your talent in Asia, but maybe then it's easier to kind of put it closer together, because the thing will need you to be there sometimes, and the people will need you to sometimes meet over there. Do you always need to fly for every meeting, and so on? So keep that in mind. Where do you find talent? I mean, we have talent together with the foundation, of course, as like a close partner of ours, I think from Japan to South America, right? So basically all over the globe, and there's a reason for this. You know, you have to find the right people with the right fit, and it's rare talent sometimes. It's not that easy. Think about that first. Also, it's of course cost differences. You need to keep that in mind, especially as a startup. Later you might change the mind on this. Yeah, and continuing for that, also from experience, the Financial Anti-Terrorist Task Force, or something like that it's called, is kind of an important influence on the regulators and the payment regulation. And some countries are blacklisted. I mean, you probably don't want a developer in North Korea, but there might be some other countries where paying them, if you want to do it via a compliance institution, like we are fully compliant. I'm so happy. Well, it's necessary in business if you become kind of adult. So keep in mind that if you get the people in a country that is complicated with the FATF, because there's some blacklisting or whatever. Russia, for example, it's basically impossible right now to pay somebody. So difficult for talent from Russia. Forget about it. They might be good people. They might not be leading a war themselves, but you just can't pay them. They are cut off, and that's it. You know, if you want to do it compliant, it doesn't work for you. At least not in a normal way. And it's better to stay on the simple side of things. Yeah, and then of course, my colleague Olga talked about these things a little bit yesterday. Remote and on-premise work, and how do you kind of interact with your team. We are now here together. It's a great joy to meet so many people also from our team here. And you just work in a different way if you can meet at times. You don't have to be in the same room all the time. We are highly appreciative of being a remote distributed team, but especially during COVID times, it really hurt. There are some people who I've met 3 years ago, but many people had never had the chance, and it's not the same, you know? So keep in mind how you want to structure that. Of course, if you have the financing, then you can get people together. But if you're a young startup, best concentrate things a little bit if you need to. meet very frequently. Maybe some people don't need to be there, but you know, find the right balance. It is not easy just to make it remote. And yeah, and then the last thing there, of course, it can be very beneficial to be in your target market. So if you are concentrating on one field, like you want to revolutionize the medical cannabis industry in Germany, for example, or in some places in Europe, yeah, I'm having some ideas here, then yeah, maybe it's good to set up shop somewhere closely, and yeah, it makes life easier. Yeah, and that's that part. Scaling up already happened, so I can't send you back to Pia, but it's recorded, so if anybody's interested, Pia Carlson was talking about scaling up. This is more about processes, software, structure, and so on. You can watch that in YouTube in some days. And yeah, that's basically all of it. I don't know how well I did with the time, but I hope you don't hate me now. And you tell me if we still have time for 1 or 2 questions, I don't know. 1 question? 2 questions? All right. Thank you.